That's recording already, is it?
Yeah, I'd say so because it says pause and stop. Yeah, there's the numbers. Yeah.
Rightio. So we're going to go into what we were saying, unschooling. Okay.
Well, maybe we should break up the three facets: homeschooling versus unschooling versus schooling, to start with, just to know the categories of what we're actually talking about.
Okay, so we all know and understand schooling by going to school and for 12 years and extending into either TAFE or uni, so that going into the formal system, and essentially that particular sort of schooling is essentially having to conform with what is formally what the system needs for it to keep going.
Yeah.
And so how it does that is that you really need to be very good at remembering what you're told and conforming with what needs to be done. And so that is the essence of that. We know then also that schooling, and schooling of course is public schooling or private schooling. Then you can have so you can have homeschooling,
Yep.
which is essentially that same thing brought into the home. So you have a curriculum that's determined by the government or determined by a church, and it comes into your home. And then you're still ticking the boxes and honouring the curriculum of that system. So you've got a little bit more scope in what you're doing. Whereas then when we go into unschooling, that's completely outside of all of that and said, yeah, guys, no, we're right. And so you're able to determine your own curriculum and determine your own philosophy of what you're doing. So a good example is some of the families that I've sort of been with, and they're of that opinion of, like Jenny used to say, well, what do I need to be a successful unschooler? Food and shelter, and a loving environment, and that basically everything else will sort itself out in essence. But essentially, as we've said over the years, watch your babies, and because generally unschooling works best for those parents who are consciously involved and participating and wanting to do it. So it does take a conscientious participation in doing the best for that child. It's not just doing nothing, but essentially it is looking at what they're interested in and making sure they have what they require to effectively teach themselves. So that's in the essence of the unschooling thing. It's developing a good sense of their own self. That's what I've observed. They end up with a good sense of their self. They know who they are, and they become autodidactic, so meaning that they are able to become self-taught, self-motivated, self-directional, and so you're just watching what they're interested in, making sure they've got it, and they journey through it themselves. So it's, in essence, like I say, it's for me and yourself, it's like over 20 years now being interested in this realm. Like from before Kuri was even born, I was interested in that realm. Other people that I knew that were doing it, the circus people that we were sort of indirectly associated with through the festival, and talking with them, watching what they were doing. That beautiful information that came from that guy Alan, that used to come to Wintermoon, and he talking about his two kids that were being unschooled, and that beautiful little advice was, okay, in that first 7 years, motor skills. And so he was basically saying in those first 7 years, if they're just busy in their body, climbing trees, riding skateboards, riding push bikes, all of that sort of stuff that involves them in developing the cleverness of their body, the development of their somatic intelligence is the cleverness of their body, will be the foundation for their intellectual intelligence, is what that man told me. So he says, if you just make motor skills, everything else will follow suit. Now, having said that, we all know that all kids are different. So some kids are really arty and really get off from a young age of colouring in or painting or drawing or whatever. And some kids are a little bit automatically intellectual. So some kids will, say like Curry, picked up reading very quickly, like myself, and my own memory of learning to read. I had it nailed. So as soon as I was in grade 1, I was reading. I could read anything. I just had a natural bent for it. Curry had a natural bent for it. And some other kids, so like when I was talking about being in Tassie with John and Heather and those guys, and so their eldest girl at 11, she still wasn't reading, and they weren't even the least bit bothered. She'll read when she's ready.
Yeah.
And then when we went down 2 years later, lo and behold, she's at high school, and by the end of the year, she was up in the top of the class with everybody else with what she was doing. So when she needed to learn to read, she just learnt to read. She didn't need to do it over 6 years. She just did it over a few months.
Sure.
She just picked it up,
Yeah.
So there's our preconceived ideas as to how we learn has been... it's been overridden. It's overridden by what we think the schooling. Like schooling thinks this is how you learn, this is how you educate. That's how it is, and because we've been doing it for, formal, compulsory schooling is only a function of the last 100 years, 150 years, say. Before that, what did we do for the rest of the history of humanity? Like for the history of humanity, the education of those young ones that were being sponsored by parents to come into the world essentially learnt from their parents and the other people in their village. They would, if they had a natural bent toward learning, language. Well, certainly in that early world for us as white fella dreaming, being in Europe, we would have been interacting with other languages. We would have had more cause to be bilingual or trilingual. And so that in itself, as well as they've pointed out, is an enormous benefit for those who are fortunate enough to be born in a two-language family, families that we know, the mum speaks one language, the dad speaks another, and for those years of innocence, they only get talked to in those languages.
That's right.
And they just automatically, organically learn two tongues.
Yeah.
So our dad talks like that, mum talks like that, So there's all of those little things that we, if we sit and think about it, the whole means of our processing of learning is different to what we have been taught to think that it is. So in that formal system, it's sort of, you're given something, repeat it, memorize and repeat and get the box ticked. In the unschooling system, it's a lot more free and open, so we certainly do want to go down the track of them learning the things so they may interact with the system, so mathematics and the language and stuff. So certainly one of the things that I suppose comes to mind is thinking about what John Taylor Gatto, he's sort of like the father of the unschooling movement.
Right.
And in his book, Dumbing Us Down, he being a school teacher for 25 years in New York, he came to realise that all that was being taught actually in the school was to know your place. There's a whole list of things, but it was, certainly it was to know where your place was, to obey authority. All of these things were being drummed into your system. You weren't necessarily being truly educated. But the point that he made that really stood out for me was saying, how did all of the ancient philosophers, what did they say that how they taught their students? And so they used, they would learn how to learn with what they called the 7 liberal arts,
right,
which was the quadrivium and the trivium. And so the quadrivium was realising that we are in a living universe.
right.
And the way to figure out and penetrate and read that living universe is to cover it all in numbers, to measure it all in every which way you can. And that's what the quadrivium was. It was addressing the universe with number. So it started with arithmetic. So arithmetic was essentially looking at numbers in themselves. So every single number has got a personality.
Right.
So 1 is only 1 by himself. Then you've got 2. Well, that's 2 ones. You can split it evenly in half. Then you've got 3. And then you're realising, odd numbers. So when you can't split it in half, there's always one left over.
Sure.
Then you've got 4, then you've got 5, and so on and so forth. Every single number has got its own unique. 12 has got its own little family. It's got 2 6s, and it's got 3 4s or 4 3s. So, it's got this little family of factors. But then you go to 13, it doesn't have any of that.
It hasn't got much
So
family.
it's a prime number.
Yeah.
So you've got prime numbers as well
Sure.
as all of these other numbers. You've got evenly even numbers. So all those numbers that we use in the computer world, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on and so forth, they're called evenly even numbers.
Right.
Because every time you split it in half, it'll eventually come back down to number 2 and come into unity.
Beautiful.
But if you've got 26, you split it in half, it comes down to 2 13s. You can't go any further.
No, cool.
So there's evenly odd numbers and evenly even numbers. So there's all of these little things that are in the personality of each and every number. And so you're looking from that perspective of saying, it's really interesting. There's all of these interesting little personalities for every number, so you get to appreciate the quality of all the numbers and how they all come together and how they all interact, all the patterns they make. So that's number 1 in the quadrivium, is arithmetic. Number in itself.
Yeah.
Then you've got number 2, geometry, numbers in space.
Right.
So they all join together and make geometry.
Right.
So you can measure 3 points and make a triangle. Measure 4 points and make a square or an oblong or and so on and so forth. Then you've got number in time, which is music.
Okay.
Then you've got numbers in space and time,
right,
which is cosmology.
Okay. Oh,
And
really?
so, yeah.
Huh.
And
so, where's this from? What teachers?
They call them the 7 liberal arts.
The 7 liberal arts.
And they're called the liberal arts because when you indulge in that art, you liberate yourself from ignorance.
Right, okay.
And so with the quadrivium, that's looking at arithmetic, geometry, music and cosmology.
Right.
And so that way you've got this very personal means of looking at the entire universe and any part of it and try and read it, measure it in some way, to look into the fabric of it. As we looked in with our curriculum, we used Jane Mathemagics.
Right,
which
I highly recommend.
Yeah. Yep. Michael Schneider's The Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe with the numbers 1 to 12.
Lots of fun.
Marty Leeds, Pi and the English alphabet.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, it's not an analytical process of getting answers to things.
No.
You just see this intricate web of patterns and significances that are sown through the entire universe, and in your own experience you see that it is alive and intelligent. So
it sounds like the parent can get just as involved in the learning as the child.
Yes, because it's not, like say, you're not trying to do sums like we were doing at school. You're enjoying the process. It's a very right brain, as they say in Vedic mathematics. It's all about pattern recognition.
Right.
So you're seeing that, let's say like in Jane's work, he uses the 9 times table, the numbers 1 to 9,
yep,
and all of their answers, 5 9s, 45, 3 2s are 6. You put all those answers in the square, then you digitally compress them all. So, 4 nines are 36, 3 and 6 is 9. You write 9 in that box. 7 eights are 56, 5 and 6 is 11, 1 and 1 is 2. You write 2 in that box. When you've got all of those 81 squares all digitally compressed down, he says, okay, now join all the number ones together. And when you join all the number ones together, you get the atomic structure of beryl. When you join the ones and the eights together, you get platinum crystal.
That's
so
right.
all of these amazing geometries are hidden in the grid of the times table. So you journey into that and you realise that it's not just a bunch of numbers. There's this amazing fabric that penetrates into the mystical depths of the universe. So you've got this right brain, feminine feeling and observation of pattern recognition and feeling into the mystery of life and creation. So on the strength of that, okay, we've measured it. And so once we've measured it, we can see the universe is beginning to talk to us. And then we go from the quadrivium to the trivium.
Right.
And the trivium then goes into letters and language.
Right.
And so it uses grammar, logic, and rhetoric are the 3 arts.
Okay.
So grammar is how words, so like you're looking at all the letters, so all the letters, you can go into the esoteric structure of the alphabet.
Right.
And so each letter is carrying a value. But then we can look at each word as an accumulation of values. Right. So a word is a value in itself, or it could be a combination of values. So a prefix, a syllable, and a suffix.
Right.
So each of those 3 things all joined together carry a value.
Right.
You know, so like I like to use that word ethic, ETHIC. E is like in emotion, energy. Energy in motion is emotion.
Yep.
TH as in theology, so TH basically designates God or the nature of God, and IC as that suffix, a noun-forming suffix, is saying in the state or the condition of, so ETHIC is saying in the state or the condition of God's energy.
Right.
And so in simplicity, you can see that, you know, in the grammar of a word, it's carrying a value. So all words can be etymologically broken down. So you play games of getting any word
and pulling it apart.
And pulling it all apart.
And finding the true meaning.
And well, it carries a value. So, you know, also we've got to realise that depending on how and where a word is used and the implication behind it is going to alter the value it's carrying.
Right.
And so there's more to it than etymologically pulling it apart. You know, there's lexigraphology where you can pull all the letters out and make other words out of it.
Sure.
And so hidden in it, so like your own name, for instance, get all the letters out of your name and rearrange them and see how many words you can make up, and all those words, you know, assemble them till they get into a sentence, and it'll tell you something mysterious about that's being carried in the value of your name.
Yeah.
Now, that takes us from the word, which is called, when we're looking at the grammar of a word, we call that passe. So passe is best known when you're singing a hymn or musicians, because you sound out the syllables.
Right.
And so each syllable has a value.
Right.
But then, if we've got a whole bunch of words and we all write them on little blocks, put them like that, shake them all up and put them on the ground, they wouldn't mean anything.
Right.
So we've got to put them in syntax. Right. And that's what the other part of grammar is, the syntax. So they can only mean something when you assemble them syntactically in a proper order.
Okay.
And so it's only in that proper order that they then can change their value. The value of what that word is can either be a noun, or it can be a verb, it can be an adverb, it can be a preposition, an article, adjective. All of those things can only happen in regards to where they're positioned in relation to each other.
Sure.
And that's what syntax is. That value of the word then gets altered by how you arrange it with other words.
Yeah.
And so all of the mechanics of what we're doing in syntax is a foundation for how we're understanding the language. So if we understand language, firstly, it's an utterance. So we're sounding it, we're cannoning. As in canon law, we're cannoning those values out. Then we capture those canon values as phonetics, as utterances, and then we use hieroglyphs to capture them, to put them onto paper.
Beautiful.
Now, once those hieroglyphs have been put down, so the letters of our alphabet and all of our punctuations and things like that, they then, when they're put in a correct syntax, are able to, that implication and that intent that I'm cannoning out can be put down, in the hieroglyphs, in a syntax, and then put all around the world for people to decipher and get the gist of, And so that's what the trivium's about, is learning all of that, which, we essentially do when we're at school anyway. But if you understand what's behind all that, you go, okay, right, I can see that.
Right.
So that's the grammar. Then the logic is what's going on up in here.
Right.
So you've not only got to use your logic to assemble that into an understandable syntax, you're using your logic to decipher what somebody else has put down there to get the value out of that.
Right.
And so it's your own logic that is pulling the intelligent decipherment of that grammar that's been presented to you. Or you take it the next step, you're going from logic to rhetoric. So rhetoric is that you've deciphered all of that language that's been delivered to you, you've logically unpacked it, got the value out of it, and then you've passed it on.
Right.
And that's the rhetoric. You're delivering it somewhere else. And so all of that together is the trivium.
Right.
The receiving of the language, the understanding of the language, and then the passing on and the delivering of the language.
So this is the theoretical side of the unschooling, you could say.
It is. And so when you understand it in its primal building blocks, it all makes a bit more sense. You sort of like you've got, okay, that's what we're doing. Okay, that's what I've just got to get out of that. That's what I'm doing with it, and that's where I'm delivering it.
Right.
And so we can decipher that. Say, okay, like you can translate that to a carpenter.
Yeah.
The grammar and the syntax of the carpenter is all of the wood and all of his tools, and the logic is him being able to figure out which bits of wood to get and how to join them together, and the rhetoric is the house that he built.
Nice. So it's a nice framework.
It is. It's a nice framework. So when you're wearing that, you can address those fundamental principles to the whole of reality.
Right. Yep.
And that's what I liked about the trivium and the quadrivium. You're just operating with that foundational understanding of the mystery of life and creation, and then you're able to approach it with feet firm on the ground.
Sure.
You're not working there's no confusion. It just brings a greater clarity.
Well, so in a sense, it's methodology, really. You've got a methodology that you're using as a background foundation to supporting your child in learning. Remembering that with unschooling, children are natural learners. They want to learn. From the day go, they're so interested, so inquisitive. And what we know, the reason for, I can only speak for myself, that I chose unschooling was because I noticed in the school that they were often really keen to learn to start with, and over time they lost motivation. And so I looked into that, and as a teacher myself, I saw that they were doing lots of rote learning. And it was quite boring and tedious, and there was no deeper understanding of what was going on. It was right or wrong,
it's
get
not
the
even
job
deeper,
done.
it's practical.
Yeah.
A practical understanding of what's going on, and then they've got that practical understanding. I think it just helps with everything that you're doing. You just sort of, like say, you've got more of a clarity as to what's going on there and why. So it's a practical understanding of what and why. the other lovely point I'd like to make is what
Yeah.
Ed brought to the show was that we're endeavouring to have our kids be cool, smart,
Yes.
and polite.
Yes, go and explain that one.
So cool is to just be yourself. So we want them to just appreciate that they can just be who they are.
That's
They're
right.
not trying to be anybody else other than themselves, so they're just appreciating who they are and have a sense of their own self. And I feel that my observation of being involved in the unschooled thing is that seems to be a natural consequence of the whole process, is that sense of self, because we're endeavouring for them to be autodidactic, so they're on their own track to figure out. They may need to, like say, they're deciding, say, I want to learn guitar because I can feel that I'm good at it.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to go and get someone to show you,
Sure.
but you are basically on your own impulse to go and do that.
That's
You
right.
know? So in every and any portion of or direction that a child chooses in that unschooling attitude, as a parent, you're finding out where they're interested and making sure they've got what they want, and they're taking their own journey into autodidactically, finding out who they are, because they're interested in that. Obviously, that's a part of who they are.
That's cool.
And so that's being cool.
Yeah.
They're finding out more about who they are, and it doesn't matter what it is, because those fundamental principles of finding out who you are and following your interest can be then adapted to absolutely anything in the entire universe.
Nice.
And so if they're able to do that, and it was just say like for Corey, it was Minecraft and the stuff they did in Minecraft. Well, now with that foundation in there, he's able to take that into any realm.
That's right.
He's already got the vibe of it in him.
Yeah.
So smart is that picking up on those practical understandings of you need to be responsible for your own intelligences, and then we, as I suppose teachers, are saying, okay, well, it's your intellectual intelligence, it's your emotional intelligence, it's your noetic intelligence, it's your somatic intelligence. Make sure you're clever in your body, make sure you're clever in your mind, make sure you're clever in your emotional interactions, and so that's being smart to see that, okay, I'm in the world and I'm responsible for how I intelligently communicate with it. So that's being just practically smart with what you're doing. And then the polite bit is then being humble.
Right.
Humble that the world is what it is and the mystery of life and creation is what it is. And so look at it. Listen to it. So to look and listen. So you're not egoily going out and saying, oh, let's do this, which you can do, but you're essentially, from that polite, you're extending out into the universe so that you can read it better. Right. You know what's going on,
so
because you're listening to it. Yeah. You're politely, humbly letting it do what it needs to do, and it informs you more as to what it is that you're going to be able to do, how you're going to react. So it's effectively, in that cool, smart and polite, it creates an attitude that is more useful. So if you're, and it does, it just means that they become more clear, more of a greater ownership of being more clever in how they are participating in the mystery of life and creation.
Yeah.
And so I thought they were, were simple, gentle things. So there's a whole squillion things you can do as a teacher of your unschooled kid. But if you've got those practical understandings, you can apply those practical, pragmatic understandings to any which direction you want to go. You're able to just be cool, smart, and polite, tick those boxes in what we're doing and how we're going about it, the attitude that we are developing here for that being. And then the quadrivium and the trivium are sort of like the cool, smart, and polite attituded kid has got those 7 liberal arts to go out and liberate themselves from ignorance in regards they're dealing with the mystery of life and creation.
Beautiful.
So you've got the 3 and the 7. And so if you've got those, those 3 and those 7, you're able to apply those fundamental principles to everything or anything that you're going to do. Now, the other good point to make is that unschooling and schooling are the two sides of a coin, and there's no reason why you can't do both.
No, that's right.
And so there is, virtue in going to school, and for some kids, they really thrive from that environment. And some other kids don't thrive. And that's what we learnt going to the conventions, that some families have some of their kids in school and some of their kids not in school.
That's right.
Because those kids thrive and are chafing at the bit and getting up every morning and wanting to go.
That's right.
And these ones, that's the last place I want to be.
Yeah.
And so honouring the unique, spirit and personality of those beings and allowing them, but also that one that is at school can take their unschool attitude into the school, and all of those things that school is negatively trying to install on the hard drive bounce off.
That's right.
It's sort of like subliminal advertising. If you already know that that particular ad has got something that looks like a penis in it or something like that, as soon as you see it, you can see it, and it's not subliminally or unconsciously endeavouring to affect you, whatever the subliminal thing is.
Right.
And so it's the same as when we understand what the subliminal motivations and agenda of the schooling system is, you can go in there, still participate, but armed with your unschool attitude, you're able to be more whole in your process of going through there. You can see through the...
Smarter.
Yeah, you're cool, smart and polite.
That's right.
You can say, oh, no, good on you. Yeah, no, okay, you just want me to memorise and repeat? Yeah, no worries, I can do that. Oh, I've ticked all the boxes.
Yeah.
So, the ones who are able to memorise and repeat the best are the ones who get the highest marks in that system. Right through till you go to uni. So the ones with the degree also have memorised and repeated. They're not essentially needing to be creative. It's generally, from what I've understood of the system, you go in, memorise, repeat, get your ticket into the game. Then, once you've got your ticket into the game and you're in there, then you're able to bring your creative,
juices into the
your creativity into the situation and evolve into bringing your unique contribution into whatever particular degree situation you're in.
Whereas in unschooling, it's the other way around. You start with your creative being.
Because we are in a different age, and I think because we are in this highly techno age of the age of Aquarius and the internet and stuff like that, we are able to... We're entering into a completely different scenario. One of the things that I remember was like being at the Golconda Circus Festival, and back in about 2011, I think it was, the guy at the festival said, he says, we're really entering into a new phase of what he's observing in the circus festival, because all of the years of the festival up until that point in time, most of the circus performers that were coming to workshop for the fortnight and then participate in the presentation of the festival on that weekend were largely coming from circus schools.
Right.
But in 2011, all of a sudden, he's now seeing there's all of these kids who are self-taught off YouTube tutorials.
Oh, wow.
So there's all of a sudden, there's this new wave of beings who are
self-taught.
are basically self-taught or availing themselves of a different scenario. And also what we say, like in the area of musical artists. Once upon a time, a musical artist had to work their way up through all of the recording studios and the corporations. Now they can go like that and just do their thing and go on. What's the one that Drew uses?
Spotify? Oh, Drew, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Reverb Nation or
There we
something like.
go.
Anyway, there's all sorts of them out there, and you can do your own
Straight
thing. And like Harry Mack,
Sure.
and that freestyle rapper,
Right.
he's got the best part of 1 million subscribers on his channel, and he's doing his own thing in his own way, and he doesn't need any of the system.
No.
And so, as examples, you can, as a unschooler who's never been to the school or in the system, you can follow your own interest and get your own runs on the board and develop your own resume and become identifiably valuable to someone who says, yeah, I can recognise those skills and abilities that this being has, and they don't have any qualifications from the system, but so there's a whole realm of possibilities for those with the motivation to journey in can completely forget about the system. They don't need it.
No.
There's certainly plenty of others among us, in the amazing diversity that we are as a species. There's plenty of others of us that will need to go into that school system. But if you are armed with some of the insights that unschool philosophy brings to the table, you as a schooler, armed with some good unschool philosophy and understanding, can be more whole in your journey through there, can have some greater advantages in regards what you're going to harvest from, because like most kids this day and age are going through, so you've got 12 years of going through there. So what is it that's going to be your prize? Besides having a piece of paper saying you've got that number on there, you want to be more, I don't know, it depends on so many things, doesn't it?
Variables.
But what is it that you're going to arrive to? Because you're basically arriving to life, aren't you? At the end of school, to go out into your own adventure.
That's right, adulthood.
Yeah.
There was this really amazing Islamic poet, and he wrote this poem to say, it was for parents, and I saw it in a hospital, and it basically said in a very melodic way that the children come to us for their childhood to get through, to be offered opportunities to find out the fullness of who they are, and then when they're ready to go into adulthood, like a butterfly, we release. We've done our job. And so I thought it beautifully depicted unschooling, that, we watch our children for the opportunities, for the preferences they have, and we support them by holding space around them for them to do the learning they want. And then they get to a stage, whether it be 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever age, where they're ready to start their butterfly, to be the butterfly, to start to live independently and get on with it. And it's so variable to each individual when it is.
Yeah, that was certainly another little aspect we can say. So that sense of independence. So that for me, and so particularly for Kuri growing up, he already seemed to have a relatively independent way about him, and I was aware of that and cultured that. So meaning that there were so many situations where he was coming and wanting something. I said, mate, you'll figure it out. And basically threw it back on him, not in any horrible sense, but just in that pushing that independence, and goes off and figures it out, And so you get those little, I don't know, what would you call it, like little feelings of success, or little feelings of accomplishment, because all of a sudden, someone's, you'll figure it out, off you go. And you go and think, I've got to do it.
I can do that.
I can do that.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of those little situations that I think that in that whole unschooling thing, it's more than just, I don't know, sitting down with the book and trying to do sums. It's a whole philosophy, and it's an attitude, and you're basically on duty the whole time you're with them, because everything that you're doing is essentially a learning process.
Exactly.
Like just going, like I remember, Chris, I do say, oh, how quickly can you make pancakes for everyone, and
Sure.
$5, there was little situations like that where that whole process of figuring it all out, getting it all done and doing it was a great thing in itself. But, the motivation was the $5. But, everything else got done and figured out, and all of the somatic intelligence of mucking around the fire and doing the fry pan.
Yeah.
So when he was like 6 or 7, he was doing making pancakes.
Yeah.
So there's all of those little situations that pop their head up at any moment of the day that are essentially learning processes as well as content. So there's also, we didn't have television, but we certainly had computability. And so it was up to us to choose the content that was available to be watched in regards to movies and stuff like that. So there's a lot of choice of content that helps nourish, what's being downloaded on their little hard drive.
That's right. And even like the likes of accessing your local community. I know with the kids when we were at Ericala, I used to take them to the library, and it was quite fascinating by stepping back and watching where they would go to find their books. And it's hard as an adult. You'll find when you first start doing this with your children, you want to fill in all the gaps. You get to the library, I'll take them here because I think they'll like this. But it's very, like you were saying, you'll figure it out. Okay, kids, well, I've got half an hour till I need to get the shopping done. Go for it. What do you want to do? And quite often, Kuri and Jolan would want to go on the computer. Okay, we'll go and figure out how that happens. And they'd work out what the process was. And next time we came to the library, they'd be out the car and straight to the counter, booking in their computer. And then the likes of Tanika would be off in the different fantasy world of books, or maybe she's looking at animals that week, or whatever she dictated for themselves. And so you're hands-on, you're available, but you're not in the way. And that's a big thing with unschooling, is get yourself out of the way. Anytime you're making a decision for them, why? Who gave you the authority to make that decision? So anything else we haven't covered?
No, just to reiterate that simplicity, so it's just basically cultivating an attitude and availing yourself of the tools. So, like I say, in the quadrivium and the trivium, just gives you a general sense of the tools that you're going to use, and so those arts extrapolate out into infinity. But if you're working from those foundations, I think that's what was for me. I didn't have to go and learn to be a school teacher. Because I'm a very practical person by nature. Once I got picked up on those practical understandings, everything else could be extrapolated from it. I could figure out, that works because that's honouring that particular principle there. So that's just an extrapolation of that. So I didn't have to be at the foundation. It was simple, like cool, smart, and polite. The quadrivium, the trivium, and then everything was out and related back to that. And the one person behind all of that, which was cool. And then I suppose the only other thing is that the opportunities of socialness but that's unique from one being to another, and ultimately the parents need to figure that out. And so we organically unfold, thanks to festivals, thanks to gatherings at your place and other places, and meeting up with other unschooled kids and hanging out with them, or letting them stay there, and all that sort of stuff.
Our lifestyles.
It became quite a lifestyle.
Well, that's right. Unschooling is a lifestyle. And one of the things that even though I come from the education background and are very aware of curriculums and the way that all works, for me, unschooling my children, I wanted them to know the basics. I was looking at survival, so I wanted them to be able to learn how to make a fire in the rain. So even if it's raining, they need a fire. They need to be able to cook their food. Okay, I want them to know how to grow their food. I want them to know how to cook their food. And I want them to know how to make money if they get caught out in a town somewhere and they're out of money and they need to get home. And so I went with the basics, just 4 basics. And once they had those skills, I felt they had the basics to survive in this society. You know, and I suppose the fifth one was to read, write, and arithmetic to whatever level that allowed them to survive. So the likes of filling out forms or, you know, adding up money to be able to purchase things and not get ripped off. And so, you know, we worked on things like with the being able to make money no matter where you are to survive. We'd work on busking, you know, and be all like, how are ways you could survive? You know, we're camping, we've got no money, we've got to, you know, go out and get some money. And I remember Luke, he really enjoyed making these mandalas. He got 2 sticks and he got some wool from the op shop. And he made these mandalas, and we're in Maleny, and he said, I'm going to go into the main street and sell them. And so that's what we did the next day. He spent all day making these mandalas. And then we went in the main street, and he actually was walking up to people and asking them and, you know, working out a price and along the way. And then he had his money for, I think he wanted to buy a soccer ball or something. You know, that's what started all of this, was his survival at that moment was he needed a soccer ball. He was sick of kicking a rock around. It was hurting. And so he wanted a soccer ball, so he found out a way to do it. You know, and then the fire and the rain, you know, we were travelling around Australia at the time, and we're up in the Kimberleys, and it must have been just the wet season was starting, and we kept on having rain all the time, but we lived by the fire. And so it was a practical thing. It was like, well, kids, if you want cooked food, you need to make a fire. And so we went through all different scenarios on how we could do this, you know, and we built lots of different styles and used lots of different materials to make this happen. And so over the years, you know, the kids had that strength within themselves that no matter what situation they were in, they knew how to survive. And as adults now, they carry that with them. Okay, Vicky.